let's talk about the Book of Vile Darkness and other artifacts in general. Welcome to my channel. I focus on tabletop role-playing games, video games, and science fiction. When you bring up the topic, the Book of Vile Darkness, you have to ask, what are you talking about? Because unfortunately, there's more than one meaning for that phrase. There was a book called The Book of Vile Darkness, published for D&D 3.5, which is an interesting book. It adds a lot of features and how to play evil characters and so on for Dungeons and Dragons for 3.5. Now, I'm not going to talk about this because there are quite a few people playing D&D 3.5, but I still tend to focus on the 5th edition because I believe there's more people playing 5th edition than there is 3rd edition. That means I'm talking about the Book of Vile Darkness in the Dungeon Master's Guide for the 5th edition of Dungeons and Dragons, where it talks about the Book of Exalted Deeds and the Book of Vile Darkness. And this got me thinking about artifacts in general in Dungeons and Dragons. And I guess I'm a grognard. I have played every edition except the basic. I've never played basic Dungeons and Dragons. I don't own a copy and I've never played it. But this brings up, what do I have here but probably the most controversial edition or supplement ever released for Dungeons and Dragons. This is Eldritch Wizardry. And I highly recommend you get a copy of this because this is actually very, very good. This was one of my favorite parts of original Dungeons and Dragons. Now, I went looking for the Book of Vile Darkness. That did not exist in the artifacts that are listed in the 5th edition. All the other artifacts in the 5th edition are in here, plus a whole bunch more that haven't made it to the 5th edition. The Rod of 7 Parts. It mentions the Hand of Vecna and the Eye of Vecna, but it doesn't talk about the Machine of Lum the Mad or the Crystal of the Ebon Flame or the Mighty Servant of Lemmick-O, Eward's Mystic Organ, the Horn of Change, the Ring of Gax. Those are all mentioned here. And so it brings up the question, when you introduce artifacts into your adventure, you really need to be playing relatively high-level characters, because a low-level character, the artifact doesn't fit well with the narrative of introducing that. So how have I done this in the past? I put the Machine of Lum the Mad, and I've done a video about that I've only had one party really get to they accidentally stumbled upon the Machine of Lum the Mad. They weren't looking for it. They got there. In the world of Tiglath, and some of you who were some of the original gamers, you know I based some of the concepts out of various things, and one I stole was from the concept that's in The Black Company by Glenn Cook. I highly recommend that book. So when we're talking about artifacts, and particularly evil artifacts, which supposedly the Book of Vile Darkness is part of, this would fit well with the concept of the Dominator in the Black Company. The Dominator is there. I created the Assimilator. I actually like Glenn Cook's names the same, but I wanted to make something different. So I created the Assimilator and the Assimilated. And I patterned in the world of Tiglath, I patterned one of the assimilated. Okay, the assimilator in the world of Tiglath, he was the great, evil, powerful wizard that ruled the world for a millennia. He was finally overthrown, and his 5 apprentices came to power. And in the Black Company, you had the Dominator and his, I think there were 12 apprentices came to power after the Dominator. And they came to power. And one of the more interesting one was the Limper in the Black Company. And truly scary character that is described extremely well. Here's the Limper. And the reason he's called a Limper is that he is, shall we say, undead, but his body is deformed. He limps. I created the Halting Walker, also known as the Gimp, who was in my world of Tiglath. And the Gimp had a staff. Now the staff helped him walk. That was one thing. And there's a reason why someone as powerful as that, I set up the entire history of why this very powerful character couldn't heal himself or couldn't get himself healed. And he is limping. He limps and he's a Gimp. So he has a staff, and the staff gives him power to go along with that. So now you have a very powerful artifact from basically a demigod who is out there, who was actually, the question was that actually in the game of the world of Tiglath? And there are conflicting stories, and I don't want to spoil anything because I hope to sort of resurrect that sometime in the future, and somebody may watch this. But there was the question, was it the real staff? Was it a fake staff? What was it? Did it actually exist? The party actually never got to that point. They got very close and then turned around and ran away, which was just sort of interesting. So if you're going to put the Book of Vile Darkness in there, or any very powerful artifact, you have to think about what is the story, why is it there? Now, I view someone like the Dominator, or in my world of Tiglath, the Assimilator, or some very powerful wizard who was able to take control of the whole world. They're the type of person who could craft this. The Dungeon Master's Guide says Vecna perhaps penned this. But it's also much more interesting to put in some ideas from Lovecraft, where you can steal those ideas about who wrote the book, and you can create the whole stories of the various Lovecraftian books and who wrote them and how they were translated and whatever. You can put those whole things in there. You don't need to put the final copy in the Book of Vile Darkness. In fact, it's probably better if you don't. You put in a translation of it someplace. It's not as powerful, but may lead you to that. There was an interesting movie called The Ninth Gate, I think it was, and it's not a great movie, but it had some interesting discussions about translations and books and so on. And if you're looking for inspiration for how to handle books of this type, I recommend that, to steal the plot from that. You may have to put up with it's not the greatest film, but it's an interesting film nonetheless. You have some interesting characters in there, and how books could affect someone that is this evil and so on. So those are the things that I recommend you look how just having possession of these type of books could influence your life. To me, personally, I think that books are just knowledge. I don't think any book is, quote, evil. There may be evil things written in the book, but a book isn't evil. It's just something that's there that anybody could. I don't view of books as actually being evil, and it's just knowledge, and it's actually more the knowledge of what you do with it. It's evil. That's just my own personal vent on this thing, minor little rant, because I don't believe that you should censor any book or that you should stop any book from existing. I think that Mein Kampf has just as much right to exist as any other book out there, and so on. And it does. It's just maybe the rantings of a lunatic, so the writings of Nostradamus, and we could go into others that are more modern. Those are interesting discussions, but you can say, are they created in your world? These type of heretical teachings, are they created because somebody found some interesting deep knowledge that drove them mad? Now that's the more interesting question. If you start putting in the Book of Vile Darkness, does that mean that there is some sort of truth that is so horrible or so wild in your world that it can drive people mad or drive them to do terrible things or drive them to change? Do I believe books can change the world? Yes, I do. If you look at the New Testament, without a doubt, even atheists have to acknowledge that did make a change in the world. And what happens is, so books can change the world for good or for evil. You could argue either way on that one. I tend to think it was for good. And so a book can change the world. A book can introduce people to new ideas. And what happens, as I've said before, I'm a bibliophile. I love books. I enjoy having books. And I have a fairly large collection of books. They're not great. Mine is not a library style. I have the books that I enjoy. And my textbooks from college, you guys can't see, but above me there are a bunch of bookshelves, which are all my technical books that I use for work. So books are an important part, and creating artifacts of books is an interesting way to add new legends, new creations, new things that you can interweave throughout yours. Now you can take what is in the Book of Vile Darkness in the Dungeon Master's Guide and weave that into your world, but you don't have to weave the real thing. Or you may link that it's a longer journey. You may have to find there are multiple copies. That's the idea that from the Ninth Gate, that there are multiple copies and only one of them is real, but you don't know which one is real. And that adds a whole interesting complexion to finding something like this. Do you and the argument is, if you read a copy that was been mistranslated or miscopied, that it will drive you insane. Now then you've got to confirm if it's the real one, and so on. So that adds a whole interesting complexion to the challenge of finding an artifact like this. Is this the real one? Are there others? You could be challenged with destroying all of them, finding them and destroying them, finding which one is real, destroying it, leaving the copies, or whatever. You can add a whole bunch of ideas like this into your world. And this could be applied to almost any of the artifacts that are there. Is it the real one? Is it a duplicate? Is it a clone? Is it a poor copy? Find these add Lovecraftian. That was what Lovecraft was great at, was adding these whole interesting stories about the Necronomicon into his mythos. And it's there, so you can add whole new ideas, steal new ideas. A good dungeon master steals ideas from lots of different sources. I've mentioned them before where I take them all. But I like the idea of taking things from like the Black Company and weaving them into your campaign, adapting them to your needs, your desires as a dungeon master, and introducing these kind of artifacts. Now, your players may never find them. And honestly, that's the thing for me. I've woven a variety of artifacts into the worlds I've created. And I think the only one that anybody ever ran across was the Machine of Lum the Man. Though there are artifacts all over the place throughout the world. They haven't found them. They haven't found the legends. They haven't found them. But I've placed them there because I wanted to place them there, and they have an effect on that area of the world. But players may not have gone there yet. But it's planned out, and it's ideas, or the seeds are planted for that. So take a look at some of the artifacts. And I encourage you, get a copy of this, because this probably has some of the more interesting artifacts, and it lists some of the powers. And it's geared toward the original Dungeons and Dragons. So you'll have some challenges adapting it to 5th edition, but it shouldn't be too hard. It just gives you ideas, because you always want to adapt it to your world, so players can't get a copy and go, oh, I know exactly what this does. And in fact, if you take a look at the Book of Vile Darkness, you should adapt it. You shouldn't take it the whole cloth of it. You should adapt it to your world, change it so that the players don't know exactly what it does. That's the key to an artifact. A healing potion, okay, players can know exactly what the healing potion is. A +1 sword, players can know exactly what a +1 sword is. An artifact, they shouldn't know what it does. They should have some ideas, and some of the ideas that the players think that they know about this should be wrong, because that adds new and interesting things that they go, oh, then you totally befuddle the rule lawyers. But the DMG says it does that. Well, and you go, well, I changed it. That's my view. You change it so that you totally befuddle the rule lawyers. But, and you go, well, it's my campaign. I changed it. It's not, what you found isn't the Book of Vile Darkness. What you found is something else, the Tome of Vile Darkness. Or you didn't find that exact thing. You found something else which is very similar to that, but not exactly the same. So it shuts up the rule lawyers. It gives you the free rein to make the changes that you want so that it fits your campaign and your world. And adding artifacts gives a depth to your campaign. And I encourage you to do that. I'd like to hear what you think about this. What artifacts have you put in your world, and how have you modified them? What artifacts have you found as a player? Were they exactly as described in the rule books, or did the DM change them? And which do you prefer? I'd love to hear those comments. Thank you for watching my video. I look forward to learning what you think about this video. Let me know in the comments below. If you like the video, press the thumbs up button. You can subscribe by clicking the link in the lower left. If you are interested, there are links to more content.